Hello, and here we are at the vegetable garden here at Cuckoo Down Farm. Now, we had hoped that children would be helping us plant all these vegetables, but Farmer John and I, well mostly Farmer John, have had to do it because, as you know, children aren't allowed out of the home at the moment, but we're very much hoping that later in the summer you'll all come and see all these veggies all grown up. So let's have a quick look at what we planted. These are sweet peas, which are flowers, and then along here these are going to be beetroot. Can you guess what these are? They're lettuce, onions, and at the back there is spinach, which Farmer John says he doesn't like, but we're growing anyway. Now come on down here and see if you can guess what are in these ones. There's something buried deep in there. Guess what it is? It's potatoes, and if you bury a potato, later on you dig it up, there'll be lots of potatoes, so they grow. And then at the back there, looks like little trees, but actually those are twigs stuck in the ground, and growing up them are Mange 2 plants. And if you say to your mum and dad, Mange 2 Rodney, they'll know what we mean. They're like a little pea. And I'm going to read you a story in a minute about some bunny rabbits. We have a lot of rabbits here at Cuckoo Down Farm, and this is a story about some rabbits, or a little boy baby rabbit who went into a vegetable garden and had a very serious adventure. We are hoping that our rabbits don't come here and eat all our plants, but we'll have to see about that. Now then, let's read the story. Right, this is a story called The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. Once upon a time there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank under the root of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go down into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden." And I'll just show you a picture of the rabbits getting ready to go out. "Your father had an accident there. He was put into a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I am going out." Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the woods to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden, and he squeezed under the gate. Here he is, squeezing under the gate. Wonder what's going to happen to him. First, he ate some lettuces and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. And this, I may say, is just what we don't want to happen in our garden. And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop thief!" Here is Peter, in a lot of trouble. Let's see what happens next. Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages and the other shoe among the potatoes. And after losing them, he ran on 4 legs, and he went faster. I think he might have got away if he had not unfortunately run into a gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons and quite new. Here he is, in serious trouble. What's going to happen to Peter now? Peter gave himself up for lost, and he shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows, who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop on top of Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him. Here he is escaping. And he rushed into a tool shed and jumped into a watering can. It would have been a beautiful place to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. What's going to happen next? Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden under a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed. Achoo! Mr. McGregor was after him in no time. And he tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of the window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor. He was tired of running after Peter, so he went back to work. Here's Peter nearly getting stomped on by the boot of Mr. McGregor. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright. He had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp with sitting in that watering can. After a time, he began to wander about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. There's the door, but he can't get through it. Let's see what happens now. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she could not answer. She shook her head at him, and he began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his watering cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. Peter thought it was best to go away without speaking to her. I wonder what that cat would do if she caught Peter. We have a cat here called Albert, and he's quite fond of catching rabbits. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Scritch, scratch. Peter scuttered under the bushes. And presently, as nothing happened, he came out, climbed onto a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could go. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him till he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down on the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. There he is, so tired he's fallen asleep on the floor. I am sorry to say that Peter was not well during that evening. His mother put him to bed and made him chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter, 1 tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime. But Flopsy, Mopsy and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for their supper, and there they are. I hope you enjoyed the story. There'll be lots more to come.